You have Jesse that I'm sure can on the call here. I think we'll just get started. We'll call the September 16th Town of Sydney Emergency Planning Committee meeting to order. To begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that today's meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Wasanich First Nations. Are there any proposed additions or revision to today's agenda? Hearing none, move adoption. Donna will just probably note the nods and for agreement. We won't get too formal. Marvelous. Adoption of the June 17th meeting minutes. Any errors or omissions from those meeting minutes? And again, silence is golden. Perfect. We'll move on and review old business. And I think we'll start with the Making Cities Resilient campaign. Right at this time, Donna and I are working on the application process to the UN, basically to ideally upgrade our status from a participating city to a role model city. It's quite a process. There's only 4 role model cities in North America at this time. The 3, there's 1 which is San Francisco, and then the others are right around us, which is the District of North Vancouver, the municipality of Saanich, and the District of Oak Bay. So we're kind of in a little hotbed of high achievers. So we're going to reach out in particular to our colleagues in Oak Bay, who have a very close relationship with and are kind of the closest municipality in size and scope, to go through their application process, and we're working with them. It also requires 3 letters of reference by very specific organizations, one being a national government organization, one being an academic, and the other one being in the community. So we have identified those 3 kind of sectors or individuals that we would like to write reference letters for us. So we're just kind of in the process of providing background on that right now. So that's basically the update there. So are there any questions? Yes, Randy.
Just wanted to, just so everyone's aware, I'm sure Councillor Duncan's aware that this was added to the strategic plan last year to look at applying for Sydney to be a UN model city, and it'll actually be part of our strategic planning update tomorrow as well. So it is something that's embedded in our strategic plan.
And then, yeah, thanks, Randy. And a little bit more history is in 2014, we were the subject of a disaster management, a master's program, a cohort from Royal Roads, where they chose Sydney to apply the UN metrics for disaster reduction and resilience. And it's part of now what they call a Sendai framework. And they provided us a list of short-term and long-term fixes. They identified us as a participating city, and then these short and long-term fixes that would basically see us graduate to a role model city. And that's, in a lot of ways, has kind of been our task list since 2014 in many ways, and not just the fire department, but there's, particularly the Sendai framework, there's a lot of linkage to development, land use, and a lot of it's based on risk reduction. So it's not so much a response orientated philosophy, but trying to mitigate the risk through land use and building community resiliency, which is excellent. So it's been very much a team effort at Town Hall. So we're at that point now that, we've checked probably, Donna and I have worked on it, I'd say probably 80 or 90%, and the vast majority of what we can reasonably accomplish of those tasks. And the ones that we haven't, completed in the entirety will be addressed, for example, in the upcoming OCP, whether it's sea level change or land use and a lot of those things. So we're definitely on target and at a point now where I think that we can kind of push this over the finish line. So that's where we are there. The COVID after action review that was provided to council on the August 17th staff report, and it was largely it wasn't so much an after action report of the COVID experience in its entirety, because we're, depending on who you talk to, we might be halfway through it. But it was very much, we wanted to gather information specific to the EOC and the kind of the emergency response aspect of it. That was accompanied by a recommendation of a survey, which was approved by council, which is already out. And we already have about 80 participants that have already chosen to reply. And that's even before we had an ad in the paper. So the uptake has been quite impressive to date. And that was just to kind of help inform us if there was a second wave, or if we did have to do it all over again, bringing staff in from all the departments through the town, and primary is communication mechanisms. What could we improve on, and how could we, serve the residents a little bit more efficiently, or what did we do well, and perhaps what could we improve on? So that was the rationale of the timing and the somewhat narrow focus of that report. Obviously, once we kind of get the vast majority of this, this COVID experience behind us, which will be months to years, but particularly working with Allison, when we get the recovery task force aspect, I'm sure that'll be part and parcel of kind of a larger after action report that will include some EOC functions, but largely the recovery task force as well. So are there any questions specific to the after action review? Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to just say, yeah, the report was excellent. It was, I think, well received by council. It actually, in many ways, I think, ticks one of the key boxes for the recovery task force in terms of looking at lessons learned and in the response component, and what would we do potentially differently based on a subsequent COVID wave, and so I think it provides that I guess that answer to that aspect of the recovery task force, and I know we've looked at that as a task force, that aspect of lessons learned and what would we do differently, and basically utilized the report for that. And quite frankly, I think beyond that, the input that we received is, from the task force members is quite frankly, we're in a very good position, I think, should we see a second wave, based on our response to the first wave, that quite frankly, we are in a relatively good place, and could we tweak things and modify things? Perhaps, but quite frankly, there's not a lot we would do probably differently, I think, based on what we did the first time.
No, thank you, Randy. Is any other comments specific to the after action review for COVID, more again specific to EOC functionality? I'm just going to jump in here, Randy. You'll be happy that your town of Sydney face masks have arrived. We'll get them to all the staff and council and everything. So we'll get those. They just came into my office shortly, a little while ago. So
yeah, just if I can, Chief, just speaking to those face masks. So the chief and I had a discussion about. He had indicated that he was in the process of making an order for his fire department for face masks, and asked me actually whether or not I thought it was appropriate for the town to piggyback on that order and order them for the staff hall and council complement, and as part of it, and yeah, I thought it was an excellent idea. I think in terms of when those are distributed to staff and council, the idea of using face masks, we're not at a point where we are going to be requiring people to wear a face mask when at work, etc. the bottom line is, and I've said this time and time again, we follow the advice of the provincial health authority, Dr. Bonnie Henry, etc. And in particular, when it comes to wearing masks, the advice is that you wear masks when physical distancing is a particular challenge in whether it's whether it's out in public, whether it's in the public realm, in a commercial setting, whatever. In terms of within the town of Sydney, within the town hall and our other facilities, I think the same thing applies. If there are challenges when you're coming into work and there's an area of congestion around the entrance, etc., you've got the mask. And my advice and encouragement is, if you can't maintain physical distancing, put the mask on. And same goes for meeting rooms or whatever. I know we have the protocols in terms of maximum numbers, etc. But the mask is being distributed to be used in those circumstances where again things are a challenge in terms of physical distancing.
Yeah, and again, Randy and I had this discussion, in whether you're a uniformed member out in the public, where it's very obvious that we're from the town of Sydney, or Brian's staff is no different, or people at town hall or our elected officials, we're all somewhat under obviously the public eye, and in respect to best practices, I think this is just a way of ensuring that our staff and the like, we're just not incentivizing, but just providing and make sure that, we're setting the best example when we're out in the public. I can go and grab a coffee at Starbucks in the morning or the Beacon Cafe, and you go in there and I'm in uniform. It just, again, we're just leading by example and just providing the tools to kind of lead by example. So that was the kind of the rationale for doing it. So we'll get those, we'll get them over to town hall, and we'll let you folks worry about the distribution from there. All right. Anything from else from old business from our previous meeting? All right. Senior care facilities update, and for that I will defer to Deputy Harmon. But just on that, obviously they've been our primary concern since the outset. Way back in March 11th, they would have and remain our primary concern. Mike, and to a lesser extent Donna, has remained in weekly contact with all of them. I know Mike had and Donna had a Zoom meeting with them I think a couple of days ago, and we did ask the specific question, because a lot of them are part of a collective, or whether it's Amica or other groups. They have had outbreaks in sister facilities under the same corporate umbrella in the Lower Mainland and the like, and we asked them specifically what actions were taken by the local government, or what was required of the local government, whether it's in the North Shore or some of the larger municipalities, and could you forward that on to us, so if there's any gaps in our planning or response, that we could fill them in. And it sounds like basically we've done basically everything we can on a proactive basis, which is good to hear. But we have asked that question, and I'll pass it off to Mike just to provide a bit of a more kind of fulsome update.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, yesterday we had a Zoom meeting with 5 of the 7 facilities, and we really just wanted to reach out and let them know what could the Town of Sydney Emergency Management Team do to support them moving into the fall, where we're seeing an increase in numbers. All facilities in Sydney have done well to this point. No staff or residents have contracted the COVID-19 virus. One facility did have an outbreak on the mainland. So once they get after action reports and back, they are going to share that with Donna and I, and then we can use that here to tighten up anything that we could be missing. But they're very thankful for the daily contact check-ins while we had the EOC and the weekly continuation. Couple conversations we did have yesterday was if a facility did get hit with COVID-19 and they needed to isolate residents or staff, facilities are already reaching out to each other to say we can help provide food services. Reached out and let them know that PMO has access to bed cots. So if we did need to isolate people in their facility and they needed extra beds, we could help and assist with that. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, for these facilities through Island Health to engage residents with visitation, which is obviously quite concerning to all of our directors of care, because people are coming in now and it's not such a distant visit now. People are starting to hug and do all these type of things, which they're saying is concerning, because even though people are coming in and they're being pre-screened, it the virus can still be passed. So they're all definitely on high alert. They're all feeling a lot of pressure from a gentleman by the name of Tim Orr, who is feeding them the long-term care directives. And I think this group here might actually write a letter to Tim looking for some support on kind of pushing back a little bit, because they said it's almost business as normal in their facilities now with respect to having visitors. Places like the Amica, the Peninsula, and Norgarden, they're independent facilities. So these residents are now allowed to leave the facility and head into Sydney, head off and do things with family. So as far as keeping people central to the site and keeping it restricted to access and really just protecting the people that are there, it's almost business as usual for some of those sites. So concerning for myself, because we've done such a good job since we first reached out in March. But just know that the directors of care are doing everything they can possible without stepping on toes from directions from Island Health.
Yes, Councilor.
I'm just wondering from Island Health, what they're looking at in terms of balancing the effects on health with the people. Like I was quite glad to hear they were letting families back in. These people are in long-term care. They're gonna die. And we already know from elder care that if they don't get that contact with their families and that hugs and stuff, they die faster and they die alone. And so I'm nervous about pushing back on letting people have a better death just for the sake of keeping them alive a little longer. My grandmother recently passed away. She had dementia and was quite concerned about it because all her brothers, she'd seen some people don't go well. And she'd actually said, I hope I get the COVID, because I'd rather die of pneumonia than the way I'm gonna die now. But nobody would give it to her. Nobody, would go in and visit her. So she up and had a big stroke and a massive heart attack because she didn't, want to go that way. So I'd like to make sure that when we come up with our recommendations, we're balancing these people's, well-being as well as just their lifespan.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor. I think just to that, any recommendations are coming directly from the sites themselves. They're just trying to base day-to-day operations with communication from health and long-term care. So they're trying to do their best. Most of our facilities here in town aren't limited to one family member. I know there are some sites where there's one dedicated family member that can be the point of contact for visitation, but our sites aren't going that route at this point.
I would agree with Councillor Duncan that the big balance is, and this is all new to everyone, is managing the kind of psychosocial health of these people in the context of their care. And I think the big thing is that not every facility in Sydney is somewhat unique. Some are more targeted towards kind of end of life care, where some are just assisted living, where some of them will reside there for 20, 25 plus years. So I think it's like Deputy Harmon said, I think it is somewhat facility specific, but I do agree, particularly for the ones that are full care, full nursing type homes, where they're going to go in and they're not going to come out. I agree with you wholeheartedly that we need, there needs to be looked at in that context. On, the challenge is some facilities have a mix. And it's when there's a mix of those and there's perhaps shared dining facilities and all those type of things, that's where I think that the real challenge comes. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that's something we continue to look at. But I do know that VHA is very sensitive, and I think a lot of data shows that you're right. Complete isolation and kind of segregation, particularly for these people, is as deadly or more deadly than actually contracting the virus. So that's not lost, I don't think, on anybody. Meet Your Street, Donna, can you perhaps provide a bit of an update on that, as well as just a little bit of the Recovery Task Force and how that kind of links in?
Sure. Just before I jump to that, was there anything more you wanted to say about the survey, Chief? Because that was first. But...
Oh, I apologize. The response survey. No, I think I alluded to that in the in kind of the after action report, and that's part and parcel of it. And perhaps if you can just remind me, that's going to close October 5th. Is that correct?
I believe it's going to close October 5th. Yeah, we haven't got absolute confirmation from Paula, but it's leaning towards that way. So it should be in the Peninsula News Review this week, an advertisement about the survey. We've also got it on the website and social media, and that will continue to be pushed out until October 5th. Any questions about the survey, I guess, before we move on, though?
Just curious, Donna. I mean, I don't know if you've got the numbers, but what's been the response been? What's the response been like? Has it been pretty good? Is it as expected?
Yeah, Krista actually just shared numbers with us this morning. She was quite pleased. So far, we've had 80 people participate in the survey, which she thought was a great response for how early it's been. So.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Good. Thanks.
Goes to show that disasters are much more popular than OCP reviews when it comes to these type of things. But we won't tell development services that. So.
Okay. So Meet Your Street, I did provide an overview in the agenda package, and I think people have probably heard about it now through council as well and other committees. So I won't go on too long, but. Basically, Meet Your Street is just a way of the town of Sydney being a support for communities on getting to know one another. There's a lot of value in having a social network within your neighborhood and knowing you can rely on your neighbor if you need assistance with something, and whether that's during this pandemic getting help with groceries, walking your dog and such. But it's also just it's a way to connect people. And right now, I think our community is really missing that that piece, and kind of like we talked about earlier, that's a big concern, is people's mental health during this pandemic. So the idea with Meet Your Street is just COVID-friendly ways of bringing people together, and the town will be a support network on encouraging those relationships. I'll keep it short. Like I said, I feel like we've talked about it a lot, but does anyone have any questions about Meet Your Street?
Mr. Humble.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment that this is one of the items that came as a recommendation through the task force to council on Monday evening, and I think for the most part it was one of the things coming from the task force that was very, very well received by council. I think they see a lot of value in this concept, in this program. And quite frankly, I think it's one of those that can easily be built upon, and creating sort of those neighborhood hubs, and I think it's an opportunity as well to as those neighborhood hubs are developed, to even get more specific community type of feedback or input and recommendations coming from those hubs on how the municipality can support the community with respect to COVID recovery, and what kinds of things the community members themselves might see as being important to them. It's one of the challenging things, I think, with respect to the task force about what are some community initiatives that can be undertaken and how to get that input from the community. This is one I think that again is very well received, but it's also an opportunity to receive more community input on potential initiative opportunities.
Yeah. I'll just add to that exactly. It's really another way of communicating with our residents, which I think right now is really important. And perhaps not everyone is checking the website and maybe they're not going downtown and seeing poster boards and such. But if we have a connection to a neighborhood that we can push information through, if they're open to it, we're obviously not going to be pushy, but if they're willing to receive information from us at a neighborhood level, then I think that's extremely valuable to have that option.
I'd agree wholeheartedly, and this is kind of the classic Build Back Better. This is kind of being done under the guise of COVID, but it's been our goal since I've started to try to implement pods or neighborhoods of resiliency, and it's not easy to do, but I think this is our opportunity to do that and kind of build that. And again, it starts with meeting your neighbor and kind of getting invested in your neighborhood, and then looking beyond COVID, well down the road, if we can have 12 or 15 different specific pods of resilience or neighborhoods that are mapped and aligned with our GIS technology, that, like Randy says, that we could support with whether it be infrastructure, disaster supplies, or things like that. Communities, we could invest all the money and all the staff time in the world on disaster resilience from a municipal level, but we'll still never be as resilient as a community that is kind of invested in and looking after each other, particularly in a large seismic event. That is where communities get true resiliency and come out the best. So that's where a lot of our focus needs to be. And I see this as kind of our first step in doing that. So that's exciting. And it is kind of a classic kind of Build Back Better opportunity for the town. So it's going to be hopefully kind of a bit of a legacy thing, a good thing that comes out of a bad thing is really the goal. Anything else? I would be happy now, if there's no new business, to kind of open it up to a round table if anyone has anything emergency program committee related at this time. Mr. Humble.
So I'm thinking, Donna, Brett, remind me, this committee meets, is it quarterly? So I'm going to throw this out as a suggestion, and yeah, please feel free to weigh in and counter me on this one. But my thought is, as we move into the fall with respect to how we're managing and dealing with COVID, of course, we have right now currently the Recovery Task Force that's been established, and I know we've called down the EOC, that type of thing. I'm wondering whether or not today's discussion was really, really good. I mean, there was some good information coming out of it, some really good updates, a lot of stuff that's COVID related. And what I'm wondering is, given the role and mandate of the Emergency Planning Committee, and I realize that it's probably embedded in the terms of reference somewhere, et cetera, that we're to only meet quarterly, et cetera. But I'm wondering whether or not there's value of increasing just the meetings that we're having. And again, whether or not it's just updates, that type of thing, that's fine. But I think the dialogue is really important, and if we have nothing to discuss, then we don't have a meeting. But I'm wondering whether or not we should consider potentially increasing the meeting, say maybe to once every couple of weeks or something, as a group, and or maybe once a month we can start. But again, I just think that it's a way for us to sort of, as as a committee to sort of keep a bit of a finger on the pulse of where we are with respect to COVID and how our recovery is going, and again whether we can foresee, you know, the potential necessity to look at a response to a subsequent second wave, etc. And I know we'll be taking direction, obviously, through the provincial health authority around that, but it's something that I think might be of value in terms of us at least having a sort of a bit of a dialogue as a committee.
You're correct that the EPC committee does have terms of reference, and some of that has linkage to the Emergency Program Act and the legislative requirement to have these. But definitely those speak to minimums. I'm sure we'd get a gold star if we did it more frequently. And I think the idea of doing it on a monthly basis is probably a good idea going forward. I support that. It provided an opportunity mostly for Deputy Harmon to make some notes and provide updates. Typically himself and Donna are almost probably daily conference calls or Zoom meetings with not the provincial health officer, but our the VHA and the Lower Island representative and the physician specific to what's going on, as well as what's going on kind of within the CRD group of the Local Government Emergency Planning Commission and the like. So provide a bit of some context there. So I think that's a great idea. And there'll be linkage with, I know flu shots have been discussed and a whole raft of other things and the ability to provide them. How that's going to go and a number of things like that. So we'll be able to provide probably some timely information that's coming from health officers and the like, and we can schedule that. So I think that's a good idea. Okay. The only other couple of updates that I have is, you know, there's a number of strategic initiatives that we had on the Emergency Program Committee, obviously for 2020. Those have been articulated on the strategic plan, that a lot of them, whether they're disaster water and they've had some budget allocations provided to them, are just going to carry over to 2021. I think we get a pass this year. Been a little bit busy due to some recent circumstances, so a lot of those things are just going to obviously go over to next year, not canceled but postponed. As we do kind of transition back from a response perspective, yesterday at 2 o'clock, we went back to performing medical calls basically to the same level we did pre-COVID. The provincial health officer had suspended fire department responses to medical calls, all but cardiac arrests and opiate overdoses, which of course is another provincial health emergency due to a result of shortage of PPE and kind of limiting exposure. So if there was an exposure, we don't wipe out a fire department and an ambulance station. As a result, now she's rescinded that order, and we're going to go back to kind of normal, but with, again, a lot of enhanced procedures in place to ensure that, you know, we're still taking steps to obviously protect ourselves. So where things have been a little slow on that front, we just expect little things will start ramping up again as a result of that change in protocol from Dr. Bonnie Henry. So that came about quite quickly, but that was in place of yesterday around noon. So that's one other change that I have to update, and that's all I have. So perhaps with that, Donna, I see the next meeting is scheduled for November 18th. Perhaps we could endeavor to move that up to the third week of October, and you could provide notice to this group as well, and we'll move forward on that basis. Nods heads. Excellent.
Sounds great.
And a motion to adjourn. More nodded heads. Donna, you can make up who did that. Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks all.
You bet.
Thanks, everyone.